In this part 8 of our car modeling series in Plasticity, we're going to begin to add some front end details, so stay tuned. Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and in this video we are going to tackle adding some front end detail to this car. Now, we've done quite a bit so far in the past 7 episodes, learning the basics of laying out the wheel arch position, building out some basic surfaces or sheets, and then working through a whole host of different design challenges and problems as we went. At this stage, we are going to begin working on the front end finally and adding some detail there. And then depending on how long that takes, we will work into the back end as well. Now, as I mentioned before, the overall process here can vary quite a bit depending on how you like to model. For us, we're building small sheets or surfaces rather than doing an entire curve network. Both approaches are totally valid. It just kind of depends on what you prefer to do. But I think that in general, as you're trying to learn this type of modeling, building out surfaces and then working from there can be a really helpful task rather than trying to build it all at once. So working in small surfaces, and then if you don't like the shape, deleting some stuff and changing it, like we did here with the arches. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start to build out the front end. And as this vehicle shape has started to evolve, it looks a lot like a couple of different vehicles. It has sort of key features from a couple different generation Corvettes. Some of the body lines are very much Ferrari, 70s, 80s Ferrari shapes. And it just kind of has taken on that shape. And again, there was no blueprint. There was nothing we were going off of, just started to build out the shapes to see what we liked. And what we're going to do with the front end is about the same. The way that we left the shape is we kind of left it squared off. So we could do a couple of different things. We could just fill it in flat up front, like let's say a 70s, 60s, 70s muscle car, and add some detail that way. Or we can decide to hack up a bit of it and have it sort of round or transition a bit more. Again, it kind of just depends on visually what you think. Now, if we take a look at something like a C3 Corvette, the fenders end pretty harsh, and it wraps around. And of course, the early ones had chrome bumpers on them, and there wasn't a whole lot of front end body shape. As you get to the later C3s, when they started to do big polyurethane bumpers and things like that, the front end shape started to round a little bit more. When you get into newer cars like the C7 Corvette or some of the other newer sports cars, you see somewhat of a mix of this. You'll see that the front end starts to round a bit and then flatten off in the front. And again, it just kind of, you need to think about these shapes. And as I look at the shape on the front, how it kind of has this sort of triangular section there, and we did the same thing on the back, I want to keep that as a nice styling cue. And I think that it would work out well if there was some sort of intake scoop or maybe even the headlight in that area, which legally it's too low to be a headlight. It has to have a certain height based on requirements. But I think that would be cool to have sort of like a vent or something going in there, and then the front end coming out from here. So that's kind of the initial shape that I'm going to play with. I'm going to carry the front lip down, and then we'll kind of work from there. Again, the whole intention of this is to kind of play around with shapes, figure out what works. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this thing from the side and get started. So from the side, we can kind of see where the hood extends to. And visually, I could see that rolling down and sort of coming back up. I could also see some of these lines transitioning into the center. But the more that I look at this, I think what I want to do is transition this fender shape to wrap around. And the first part of that for me is going to be transitioning this edge to this edge. So I'm going to try to do that with a blend curve. Just going to select the edges and then play around. I think this first one could start there, but the second one, maybe put it somewhere around that. We'll do G1 for both of those and just kind of look at the shape. So basically we would take this panel and we would start to transition it around the front using sort of that edge. I think that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and accept that. I'm going to use Shift and I to imprint it, and then get rid of that curve. Now, I don't necessarily know if this is going to be the right shape, so I'm going to take the entire body and duplicate it, and then hide the duplicate. And this looks like it was that original piece of the windscreen. I don't really need that. So now I've got this duplicate. I'm going to just call it duplicate so I know what it is. And now I can freely start to delete stuff. So I think I want to keep this body line here. So we worked hard to get that body line down the center. I want to keep that, but I want to try to roll the top under. I don't know how this is going to look, but this is the first thing I want to try. There looks like there's a tiny little piece here. And I am going to try to do Alt-J on that. And it doesn't like it. Let's see. Now, if you have to zoom in real far on something like this, sometimes it helps to go into orthographic mode instead of perspective. But that is very much like 70s front end. But it's okay. Let's give it a shot. The next thing that I want to do is I need this curve, or a very similar version of this curve. And I'm going to duplicate that with Shift D and just move it down for now. And wow, it's way too far. And maybe like that. The main reason I want that is because I want to do a bridge curve to there. So we'll start at 0, G1 tangency, and just take a look at the shape. I think that'll be okay. I'm going to go ahead and accept that. Don't need that anymore. These two can be joined together. Let's go ahead and select them. J for join. Oh, no, that won't work. It didn't trim that. All right, so we're going to select both of these and do Alt-J. And that should break up that little section there. And now we should be able to join these two together. So that's one curve. Okay. So theoretically, we should be able to go from this top edge to this bottom edge with this, but I want something at the midline as well. So I'm going to do a line, so Shift and A, from there to there. We'll rebuild it, and then we'll give it some shape. So I think I want it to just bump out ever so slightly. Remember, we're still leaving sharp edges. We're not worried about blending this yet. We can always do that kind of stuff later. But let's go ahead and go to our edge selection. And I'm going to go from here to there. We'll loft. Actually, you know what? Sorry, back up. Extrude this so we've got a tangency reference at the midline. All right, now we can select these and loft from one to the other. Tangency, but G0 at the top. Shift select this. And let's just take a look at the shape. So I don't like that. Not even a little bit. So what we're going to do is back up till we extruded that. And I want this to come out further. So it doesn't look good rolled back. I'm going to actually point this out a bit. So basically that means moving this forward in the Y direction. Oh boy, that's ugly. Okay. We're going to fix this by adding a horizontal line here. And we'll just get rid of this completely. So basically what I want is I want this to have more of a rounded shape. If we get too close to tangency between this and this, it's going to be difficult when we go to blend it. But again, I'm going to sort of gamble, roll the dice, and see what we can do. So once again, I'm going to come from here to there. We'll be at 0 for both of these. Do G1 for both and just take a look at it from the top. On the first one, G2. Yeah, I'm going to use G2 for both. It matches the shape a bit better. And then we can get rid of that. Extrude that so we've got our midline reference. And go to our edges and try again. So we'll loft from one to the other. G0, tangency there, and just take a look. So that looks a whole lot better. Definitely not perfect, but I think that shape works better with the body. So we'll get rid of that, get rid of that. It does bring up the interesting point of this. The shape isn't really going to work, that overlapping shape, I don't think. So we might need to abandon that. But that's okay. Remember, we have a duplicate of this, so we can always go back to the duplicate if we'd rather have that shape and kind of see what that overlapping shape looks like. But for right now, let's go ahead and join these together so it heals up any little gaps. And then let's work on the bottom piece. So I think I'm going to leave the bottom, or there's going to be a grill, obviously. There'll be an opening in the center. So I want to figure out where this piece is going to connect. So from the top, we'll do a line, and I'm just going to come here, but then from the front, I'm going to move this up. And from the side, so basically we're going to come up here, and then maybe we'll add a little splitter or something to the bottom. But what I'm looking for is the rough projection of that angle. And I'm going to move this underneath. Yeah, we'll move it there. So basically now we've got a reference point for doing a bridge curve. So this one will be at 0. This one will be at 0. View it from the top. Actually, let's view it from the bottom. So hold down Alt and just kind of take a look at those shapes. That looks pretty good. That looks okay from there. So I'll accept that. And then we'll do a line from mid to mid. We'll rebuild it. And maybe make this one curve in just a little bit. And extrude it. I don't necessarily know that I need to extrude the edges at the midline, but for me, making sure that I'm controlling tangency there ensures that I have a smooth mirrored transition. So I just do that in general. It probably isn't necessary, but it's kind of like an extra little insurance. So one thing to note, which I'm just realizing now, is that fillet body line. We've got 2 edges over here, and we're going to transition to 1. It's probably not going to disappear how we want. So we'll just have to take a look at that. And then shift select these. And you kind of see that the body line goes forward, but then it just kind of fades away. Which might be okay, but actually looking at it, how it bulges out, I think that I want to use that. So Control Z. We're just going to back up until we extruded that surface. Go back to our all selection. And I think I want to bump this out a little bit. And then just try it again. So extrude, delete, edge selection, and we'll loft. Now, generally with stuff like this, I like to use a loft because it's going to treat the tangency influence a bit different than if we used a patch. So we kind of see that fades away, which is good. I like that. I'm going to go ahead and accept it, but then hide it. And I'm going to do the same thing with a patch. So select all the edges, and then patch. And then we're going to drive tangency here, tangency here, tangency here. And you can see that this is different. The influence of the profiles in a loft carry that shape further, whereas patch kind of treats everything as equals. So all these G0s have just as much influence as this G1 tangency here. So the shape just isn't going to be the same with patch as it is with loft in this case. So for something like this, I prefer to use a loft. So I'm going to go ahead and join these together. And I think that's starting to look okay. This transition here is a bit weird, but we are going to do some work on the hood anyways, so I'm not too concerned with it. I'll probably actually drop the hood down and come back up. Not real sure yet. Again, this is all kind of part of the process, just looking at how things look and then adding to them. So that actually looks pretty good coming up. I don't necessarily know that we need to add a splitter, but I just want to visualize it. So I'm going to use the line tool and I'm going to come from here kind of straightforward, and then G moving only in X and hold down Control. If we do this from a front view, actually, hold on. Select that point, go to a front view, GX, and if we hold down Control, it'll snap to that vertical origin. And then we can add another line, which will be our sort of tangency reference. And then we can begin to build out a curve. Now, if we want to manually design this curve, we can. I generally like to start by using bridge curve to make sure I have tangency. And I'm going to go to that point. Make sure that we're at 0 here. And I'm going to view this from the bottom. So let's try G3 on both of those. So you can see that it's not quite giving us the right shape, but I'm still going to accept it. And then what I'm going to do is take these 2 points and move them in Y, and then move them out in X a little bit. I don't really care about tangency here. I only care about it at the midline. And right now, I'm just trying to visualize what sort of an air dam or a splitter would look like. So we'll go from here to that midpoint. We'll rebuild it like we do everything. And then, yeah. So these points really should be down and flatter. So the way that I'm going to handle this is with those selected, I'm going to scale, but I'm going to reset my pivot point. I'm going to use V, and I'm going to set my pivot point, let's say here, and then scale in Z, and then manually enter 0, which will scale them down to that vertex. That should create a nice straight line. All right, so we'll extrude this at the midline again. Get rid of that. And then this is going to be a bit tricky because we have a triangular section. So I'm going to try to patch this first and see what it looks like before I try to loft it. Generally, I don't want to loft when I have a triangular section. Make sure we have tangency here. The rest doesn't really need tangency. Then because it's a patch, it joins everything together, so we'll need to shift delete that. And let's just look at it from the side. That looks okay. Obviously, we're going to open up some sections of this, but I think I'm going to do Control Z and undo to that extrude. And I want to change the shape a little bit. So what I'm going to do is take these 2 points and kind of move it back so it's a little bit more in line with the shape of the bumper there. And then I'll extrude it out. And once again, hopefully if you made it this far, then you're following everything. This is just all the entire process of trying to come up with a new concept shape. Nothing here has been pre-modeled really. I say really because I have played around with shapes to kind of get an idea for how, I haven't done the front end yet, but for like how I wanted to do the roof and the A-pillar, I did play around with some shapes there. And we'll delete this, Shift Delete. And get rid of that curve. So now let's look in a little bit better. And what would happen is from this bottom edge and from here, we would come down. So if I did like Shift Duplicate, moved it only in Z, then what we could do is say like loft from one to the other, G0, and just start to add a little bit more to it. So I think for right now, I'm going to leave that. Obviously, we just sort of added this on, so I could always just delete that if I wanted to. But I think once we get some grills and some openings in here, it'll start to look a little bit better. So if I took, let's say I took a line like this and came back. I'm going to use B on the keyboard, which is going to be fillet, which we can't see because it's behind everything. So it's going to start to round those off. And then what I can do is C to cut. And that leaves this little inside piece here. So you can see it's quite a bit different once we get rid of the bulk of that inside piece there. I am going to leave this curve for right now. I don't necessarily know if I need it or not. But, then we could try to do a fillet here. It's only going to let me go so far with the fillet. And there are going to be some issues in this corners which we'd have to address. But again, let's go ahead and let's select it. We'll do a small fillet. Join these two pieces together. And we can try to do a small fillet here as well. That's a chamfer. It does. This back corner is the problem, so we'll just have to address that manually later. And then if we want to work on this opening, what we could do is we could select the opening after we added the fillet. Going to do Shift D, pull it back a little bit, and I'm going to scale it in Z only, scale it down a little bit. And then I want to scale it in X, but I want to move my pivot point first. So V, I'm going to move my pivot point to the midline. And now if you look at the coordinate system or the XYZ on the gnomon here, we're going to have to use Z because it changed directions. And then we will just loft from one to the other. So I need to select all the edges, work my way around, and loft from one to the other. Get rid of that. And then the piece that we hid, if we want, we can take that and just move it back in Y. And then we can add extra detail to it or whatever we need to do. But for right now, I'll just kind of leave it there. Just for the time being. Let's move it forward just a little bit more. Here we go. All right, so overall, I think that looks pretty good. I am going to, let's see, I want to join this and the loft together. So it's this piece and this piece. We'll hit J. And then we can maybe add a small fillet to this corner. It's probably not going to like it because of this small transition here. It's thinking pretty hard. Yeah, so it doesn't like that. Just in case, I'm going to do a quick save. But I want to let's go ahead and hide the edges. Just see what we're looking at. So I think this works pretty well. We carried that body line all the way around the front, and it disappears right at the midline, but we still kind of have it around the corner. And again, we're still going to add some more detail to the hood, and we still need to do the back end. But I think we can take this. Let's go ahead and mirror it. And I'll hide that piece. But so far, I'm pretty happy with it. I like the opening in the front. I like the shape of the front end. Let's take a look at it in clay. Yeah, so I think everything's looking pretty good. It does need some work because it does bow in the center. Something that we can take care of. Not really a big problem for right now, but definitely maybe want to bring that grill opening a bit lower or potentially just straighten out that section in the middle. Again, not a big deal for right now, just something that we want to be aware of and play around with. So just keep in mind that when you make these shapes, you can always go back and delete them and rebuild a different shape. And so just don't get too stuck on making it perfect the first time. Just kind of throw some shapes out, see what sticks. And if you like it, great. If you don't, then we can delete it and work with it. So we are going to do some more work on this front end. We are going to do some work on the hood, adding some more detail. I want to maybe add some lines that kind of follow this, a cowl that goes up over the windscreen a little bit, and we also need to still build a back end. So still plenty to do. So if you have any questions on what we've seen so far, please let me know. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.